This hurts me to do. While I actually got Sega's Mega Drive before Nintendo's SNES, it was always Ninty's grey terror I loved more. I can't explain it, it's just one of those hard to quantify feelings that some of you humans have. And yes, I did have both consoles even as a child, and you can thank divorce for that, but I digress. See, common knowledge has it that the SNES routinely shat on the Mega Drive. Don't hate me too much, but generally speaking, it did. Games looked better, played better, certainly sounded better, apart from the Streets of Rage soundtrack, of course, but they were just superior on the SNES every single time. Except not every single time. More often than not, the SNES and Mega Drive versions of games were pretty much on par. The Nintendo version featuring brighter colours and better sound, the Mega Drive versions running a bit smoother at a higher resolution, but with no real be-all end-all difference. Yes, sometimes a cross-format game made your SNES shit gold and the Mega Drive burn half your house down. The other half would only burn down if you plugged a 32X in, and it turned out that was because the house was trying to protect itself from being too badly soiled. But it wasn't as cut and dry as common knowledge seems to hold. In fact, there were occasions when the Mega Drive version of a game was better than the SNES one. So what have I gone and done? Well, I've only gone and rounded up 15 examples of when that bloody well went and bloody happened, haven't I? Bloody. Yes. To be clear, I have included some games that were actually entirely different games on each console. I would apologise for this blatant subterfuge, but I'm not in the slightest bit sorry, so deal with it. Number 1. Mortal Kombat. Let's begin at the obvious one, which we all remember if we're of a certain age and are not a stupid tiny child who thinks the games being shown here look rubbish, they don't look rubbish, you look rubbish, stop being rubbish. Mortal Kombat. It was and is all about the violence, yes? The SNES version looked the part, with dim graphics looking swish, the sounds being nigh on flawless and the action running well enough, I suppose, but it lacked one thing: blood. The claret was replaced, thanks to Nintendo's overbearing sense that all games have to be for all the family, with sweat, in the biggest inverted commas ever, and most of the fatalities were changed, bar Liu Kang's rubbish helicopter kick uppercut, Sonya's kiss of death, and Scorpion's excellent burner motherfucker. I mean, Raiden's finishing move was changed to something pretty damn cool, not that I was able to pull it off because thanks janky control, but Kano's finisher was whatever this shit is, and good god Johnny Cage's, I mean, look at it. Look at it. Meanwhile, on the Mega Drive, you had a game that didn't look or sound quite as good, but one that both played smoother and, thanks to the cheat code I still remember to this day, down up left A right down, spelling dullard, it had full blood and gore. Yep, this was the head-ripping, heart-wrenching bucket of violence we all loved as kids. Naturally, it helped that the game was a mite quicker with less input lag than on the SNES, looking at you, Raiden, making it objectively better to play, but it really was the blood and violence that set the Mega Drive version of Mortal Kombat ahead of its Ninty peer. Like, they didn't even bleed when they landed on the spikes in the pit. What's the point in that? It all changed from Mortal Kombat 2, obviously, but that's not the point of this list. Number 2. Micro Machines. I actually missed out on these differences back in the day as I played the original Micro Machines on the Amiga, where it was, as far as I'm aware, the same as the Mega Drive game. That is to say, a classic top-down racer that's as much fun for a group of idiots today as it ever was back in the early 90s. Fast, frantic, fun, fabulous, fantastical, ferocious, frumpy, flabbergasted, fluff. Yeah. It's such a good formula that studios are still trying to recreate it to this day. There's a new Micro Machines game coming soon as I make this video, and things like Tabletop Racers carry the torch admirably. But it's all about Micro Machines, which was absolutely brilliant fun. Unless you played either Micro Machines game on the SNES, in which case you were met with a bizarrely downgraded port of the original Mega Drive version. It might have looked the part, but the Nintendo version featured lower resolution and a squashed viewpoint, meaning you couldn't actually see as far ahead on the tracks as you were meant to be able to, as well as treacle slow turning circles and generally slower cars. For such a quick-paced game of timing and reactions, that's what we call in the business a big fuck-up. There's also generally shittier AI, with computer cars seemingly suicidal rather than mad challenging like in the Mega Drive version. It's refreshing to go from the rock-solid challenge of the Sega version to the much easier game on the SNES, but it's not really a positive in the long run. I had read something from my sources, see the description for those, about the corn on the cob physics being off. Yes, that's a thing, and I just said it out loud. But rather than just taking their word for it, I tested it myself, which took forever because getting to level 5 on the Mega Drive is really hard, stop judging me, and the corn physics are fine, so stand down people, no corn emergency. And there was the J-Cart for the Mega Drive, a built-in multi-tap that allowed up to 4 players to get involved without having to buy extra hardware like you did with the SNES. Bliss! Both Micro Machines games' difference on the Mega Drive and SNES are a great way of showing just how finely tuned the series was. Just a few little tweaks and negative changes made it something to avoid in the ported version, and another victory for Sega. Number 3. Flashback. It's easy to remember, forget. It's easy to do something that slips in my mind, but consoles 20 odd years ago were quite different from one another. Not like today when you can probably put a PS4 disc in an Xbox One and have it play perfectly just at 900p upscaled. All of the lols! No, see, Flashback was made on and for the Mega Drive. It didn't come out on the console first for some reason, but it was made for Sega's black box. As such, it had to be ported to the SNES, and as we're already beginning to learn here, a port without full care and attention from one to the other results in flawless results every time! No, wait, not that, a cock-up. It results in a cock-up. Yes, the SNES version of Flashback was not the best way to play the game. It was, in fact, one of the worst ways to play the game, and there were a lot of ways to play Flashback. It was out on pretty much every format in the early 90s. The SNES version featured slowdown galore, irritating loading times, missing sounds, plenty of cut music, the music left in the game was terrible quality, and more. With Flashback being, at the time, such a technically advanced title, it wouldn't be in the realms of silliness and stupidity to naturally assume its superiority on the SNES. But it wasn't superior, not in the slightest. Additionally, the SNES version of Flashback was yet another game subjected to Nintendo's bizarre wave of early 90s censorship. No, that's not your censorship where somebody far more intelligent than you tells you you're an idiot who should shut up with your semi-formed rambling thoughts on why being a racist's a good thing and that's why you should earn thousands a month from crowdfunding. Admittedly, this censorship wasn't as ruinous to the experience as A, other problems, or B, Mortal Kombat's non-violent approach. A bar became a cafe, Death Tower became Cyber Tower, how very futuristic, and some mutants were recoloured to be green. But no, that was just additional nonsense beyond the fact that Flashback wasn't a very good SNES port, something that really should have taken advantage of everything Nintendo's machine could and did offer, instead ended up looking quite silly next to the apparently underpowered Mega Drive. Number 4. Aladdin, Street Rat Simulator. Well, this is where I step into controversial territory, but as the snappy, succinct old saying goes, saying a thing people don't all agree on is a good way to make more folks watch your video and thus get you loads of money even if you don't monetize things like I haven't right now, though I can't speak for this video in the future if I do change my mind and decide to have monetized it. Aladdin on the Mega Drive and SNES wasn't a case of a port of the Street Rat Simulator from one console to the other, it was two different games from two different teams released at two different, well, slightly different times. But my rules say I'm allowed to include this because I made up the rules, and to put something to bed that's been bugging me since my youth, the Mega Drive version of Aladdin is far superior to the SNES one. Aladdin, the thieving little bastard, was transmogrified into a video game by Capcom on the SNES, and thanks to Nintendo's ridiculous obsession with keeping everything clean and kid-friendly, the known criminal was stripped of his sword and forced to face all of his enemies in unarmed combat, all by throwing apples. The Mega Drive outing for Asbo Sporting Laddie, however, was only barely short of being a masterpiece, and definitely one of the best licensed games ever made. Aside from the fact it was a quicker-paced game with far more interesting action, and just as much apple throwing, though for some reason in Sega land lobbing an apple is a lethal action, Aladdin on the Mega Drive was and is utterly gorgeous. I'd say standing still the SNES version does edge it, but as soon as these things get into motion you see some honest-to-Betsy love on show on the Mega Drive version. That thing is crafted from top to bottom and really does its Disney heritage proud. Plus it has bonus stages where you play as a monkey, thus making it one of the true greats of gaming, the Monkey Sim. And the absolute proof we all need that the Mega Drive version was the superior one when it came to Aladdin? Well, what happened with the next Disney tie-in, The Lion King? Capcom didn't return, Virgin was left to make the game that came out on all formats, because it made better, prettier, more fun Disney games. Fact in your face. Number 5. EA Sports. It's in the game. That was actually a decent impression, so I'm going to leave that in. There's a few specific titles I've opted to miss out in this list, but instead just put them all under one umbrella here. EA Sports, it's in the game. Unless it's on the SNES for a couple of years, in which case it's a dodgy port of a game clearly made with the Mega Drive in mind. Towards the end of the SNES's lifespan, the devs had clearly caught up and were making things on a par, foretelling pun, with the Mega Drive. But for a few years it was one-way traffic with most of EA's sports output, probably because of blast processing. No, but really, the Mega Drive's clock speed was faster than the SNES's, which is why this list features more action-y, quick-paced games. They just function better on the Mega Drive, generally speaking. Anyway, I digress. FIFA, NHL, Madden, NBA, all around 92 to 94, better on the Mega Drive. None had specific smoking gun level differences that made them the go-to versions, and it was really more of a feel kind of thing. You know if you played them that things just felt a bit sluggish and wrong on the SNES, while on the Mega Drive it was the way it's meant to be played. Wait, shit, that's a slogan for NVIDIA, what do I do now? When you look at something like PGA Tour 3, you end up with a much more clear-cut example of those differences and the Mega Drive's superiority. Released on the SNES as PGA Tour 96, though it was just a port of PGA Tour 3, Nintendo's Golf 'em Up was, well, it was shit compared to the Mega Drive version it was based on. It was, callback, below par. While the Mega Drive featured more pre-course detail and a flyover including advice from pro players on how to tackle the hole, the SNES didn't. It just dumps you in there and demands you get golfing. So you do, with no idea what the upcoming hole is like, because who needs Fuzzy Zoella's advice anyway? Then you realise the Mega Drive version runs at a fair old pace, while the SNES is like playing golf in a treacle factory, slow and stupid. Also a health and safety issue, but that's not the point being made. The point being made is far more important, in that it takes an eternity just to look at the course map. And if you plan on checking the lie of the green, you're gonna have to take a few days holiday. Quality 3D rotation. Best of all, there's no backspin on the SNES version. No backspin on a golf game, or topspin, unless I missed something, which I don't think I did. I mean, I don't ask for everybody's golf levels of ridiculous spin with flames and all that amazing nonsense, but, isn't backspin a really big part of golf? Oh, also EA's Mega Drive games had that yellow tab on the cartridge, which made them cool and weird, and I used to press it hoping that there really was something in the game. Number 6. Robocop vs. the Terminator. Another time where it was just a straight-up different game on the SNES and Mega Drive, but another of those clear-cut occasions where Sega's lack of aversion to that red viscous liquid led to a much better experience. Honestly, I never really got past that 12-year-old's obsession with blood and guts and gore and how cool it is to make people explode with guns. We're all psychopaths. Robocop vs. the Terminator on SNES was a base-level platformer from Interplay in which you played as Robocop walking around shooting women and bins and getting knocked over by barrels because Bobby weighs about 20 kilos apparently, I don't know. It was a standard 16-bit platformer template with some beloved sci-fi characters plastered on top of it. It was dull and it was hardly any fun at all. It was also really quite stupid, like pretty much every game made in the 90s when oversight didn't exist. The Mega Drive version of Robocop vs. the Terminator, though, is one of those games everybody seems to remember. Manic, atmospheric, gosh darn violent. It's the dynamic movement of the camera, the speed at which everything takes place. Just like Aladdin, this was clearly a labour of love for David Perry's Virgin team. Notice how I'm not making any jokes about that. Yeah, I'm mature, me. You also shoot far less women on the Mega Drive version unless you enter a cheat code, and I saw no instances of Robbie Copper being knocked over by a flipping barrel. I mean, good God. You do shoot bins, mind. All of which leads us to number 6.5, The Terminator. The Mega Drive version was way too hard and actually in retrospect isn't that great a game, but by crikey it wasn't the SNES version. This is a game based on The Terminator, but from the look of things it's Contra by way of an overuse of crayons and a lack of ability to make something fun, atmospheric, or in the least bit good. Ugh, moving ever so swiftly on. Number 7, Fatal Fury 2. Neo Geo games tended to be a mite better on the Mega Drive, just like the EA Sports lineup, so I could have again opted for the whole range in this entry. Instead, I just looked at Fatal Fury 2, which I was reliably informed was a clear case of MD over SNES superiority. And it is that, yeah. The SNES version of the game is fine. It works, it plays okay, it had that SNES slowness we're all beginning to realise is very much a thing, and as a result it did suffer in the whole quick-paced batter each other in the face stakes. It was, in short, a basic pared-back arcade port of the home console, which would have been absolutely fine were it not for the fact that the Mega Drive version ran a lot better and had actual whole other elements in it that made it a lot more fun to play. Incorporating the combo system from the then newly released Fatal Fury Special, the Mega Drive version of Fatal Fury 2 acted as a kind of gap-bridging, almost experimental release. Rather than going the route the SNES and other formats went in being a cut-back port, the Mega Drive version instead ended up being its own beast, something created more with the system itself in mind, rather than just trying to be as good as in the ancient coin-up layers of yore. Yes, it wasn't a patch on the original arcade or Neo Geo version, but the Mega Drive's take on Fatal Fury 2 was more than just a straight-up stripped-down port. Takara tried something extra with it, with the extra bit of time they had on the Sega version, and it worked really well, and frankly just made the SNES version look even worse than it probably was. Number 7.5, Samurai Shodown. Generally speaking, this was a running theme with SNKs on the Mega Drive and SNES, as previously mentioned, with Samurai Shodown, Samurai Showdown another fine example of the gulfing quality between one format and the other, and the arcade version being unquestionably better. Again, what are you going to do? Of course, you would foolishly expect it to be the SNES that's superior, as it was the de facto home of fighting games thanks to Street Fighter 2. Check the title of the video again though, you foolish fool. No, this was yet another time where the Mega Drive shat on the SNES and giggled about it. Sega's version had bigger sprites, chunkiness was key with Neo Geo games, while the SNES had these diddy little Wii characters and muffled sound. While the Mega Drive version was far from perfect, missing an entire character in Earthquake and seeing more than its fair share of slowdown, it did feel both closer to the arcade original and like a version its developers had actually put some legwork into. Meanwhile, the SNES version felt like a SNES fighting game that someone had just crapped out in a rainy afternoon. Number 8. Mickey Mania. Not Mickey Mouse's finest hour, Mickey Mania was nonetheless a great idea, travelling through Mickey's past cartoons to do shit, and good but not great fun to play. It was also another great example of something, a Disney something again, not finding its feet in a Nintendo road. Mickey's outing on the SNES ran at a lower resolution than on the Mega Drive, as well as being generally slower, suffering from actual slowdown, having not insignificant amounts of content cut, taking a bunch of appearances from Pluto out, even missing animations, something that's, important for Disney. All this sat atop a general feeling that this just wasn't meant to be on the SNES. I mean, it even had annoying loading times on a cartridge game, something I honestly didn't know was a thing that was possible until Nintendo DS, because carts are supposed to be instant all the time and never have any problems, right? Aren't they? Come on, Cartridge Defense Force, show yourselves! Put me in my place! Fight me! The Mega Drive version of Mickey Mania, however, was just, good. It was alright. The fact it was made for Sega's machine really shines through, but I don't think it was on a par with the game I'm going to mention more than any other in this list, Aladdin, when it comes to Disneyfication through and through. And it was nowhere near as good as the classic Mickey title Castle of Illusion. But the problem there is Illusion never did come out on the SNES, so it wouldn't fit in this comparison, and oh shit, I've just brought it up so it appears I've had some cake and eaten it too, booyah! Number 9. Pirates of Darkwater. Another one where they were actually two different games, but if you haven't learned by now that I don't care, you never will. Or maybe you will at some point, I don't know. Anyway, Pirates of Darkwater was a cartoon tie-in, so of course we all expected super high quality for this swashbuckling adventure, because no cartoon tie-in game has ever been bad in the history of the world. I'm lying so much my soul hurts right now. When you picked the game up on SNES, you were met with, when you bought Pirates of Darkwater on the Super Nintendo, it was a game that you... Sorry, I keep forgetting what I'm saying. See, I keep remembering that I played this game on the SNES and it keeps making my brain rebel against me. There was nothing redeeming about it, nothing enjoyable about it, nothing remotely likeable about it. It was a lazy tie-in in the worst sense, trying to piggyback off the popularity of actual good side-scrolling beat-em-ups. It swiftly failed and was never heard from again. Plus, fuck me, this AI. Literally stand still and win. Great job, guys and gals. On the Mega Drive, however, Pirates of Darkwater, while still not a world beater, was a game that, if you played it, you would remember. The big difference maker was the fact that, while not an amazing game by any stretch, it did have a level of ambition behind it. At first glance it seemed to be a basic platformer, but there were extra layers, mainly of the item collecting RPG ilk. It brought in elements that made sense for something based on a cartoon that was about a long-winded quest, things that did have things in common with your role-playing games. The SNES version was just a terrible scrolling brawler that was so unremarkable you'd literally forget you were playing it while playing it. I have no idea why there were so many different versions of games like this, it just seems so weird. Fucking Niddler though, Jesus Christ, that cartoon. I don't remember if it was actually shit or great, it was definitely cool, at least to me, because I am the arbiter of all taste and coolness, but Niddler can sod off. Drown that twatty monkey bird thing quickly. Number 10. WrestleMania, the arcade game. This is an interesting one to me because I'm a cool dude from the future who loves wrestling like all cool dudes from the future do. Also because I only ever had this game on the PlayStation, so I just naturally assumed the SNES version would be better than the Mega Drive version one. I mean, it was a mid-90s release when devs had the hang of the SNES, and it was always capable of pushing out better versions than Sega's machine, right? If you've been paying attention to this list, you might be able to guess the answer to that one, maybe, possibly, if you're not entirely stupid like most people are. We got it? Okay. Yes, the SNES churned out a subpar version of the game I loved as a 13-year-old. Even though 33-year-old me can see quite clearly it's a bit cack, to use a word I did use when I was 13. It had 2 characters from the roster of 8 cut, so no Bam Bam Bigelow or Yokozuna for the Nintendo Defense Force. Yoko I don't care much, but no Bam Bam. Come on guys, that's a bit poor form. If you wanted a match not absolutely riddled with slowdown, you were limited to one-on-one matches, but even then you'd get enough with just the 2 burly blokes on screen. Trying it with a one-on-one match was just more of that treacle gaming we've seen so much of from the SNES in this list. The Undertaker had less bats, yes that's a thing, there was this shit crowd, it just, lacking, poor, something with issues. I want to jump cut in now and be all bright and happy and tell you how amazing the Mega Drive version is, but still not a great game, sorry. but it is the far better version on Sega. Your full roster of characters, so you get to play as a large fat man with a tattooed head who dressed as fire, you get the irritation of having to take on 2 other guys at once at full speed, the Undertaker has more bats. Yep, that's a win by DQ for the Mega Drive. Number 11. Urban Strike. The Strike series home was on the Mega Drive. Sure, I might have played Desert Strike first and mainly on the Amiga, closely followed by the PSP port on the Mega Drive Collection, and I might not have actually played any of Urban Strike as a kid, but we all know this was a chopper frenzy that belonged to Sega's little box that could. Urban Strike was that very tale writ large. On the SNES, it's a rubbish experience. It's a good game at its core, but it's riddled with slowdown and bugs and things that make it chug and break in good old irritating fashion. It runs at a resolution that you might not notice is lower than the Mega Drive versions, unless you want to look at your commanding officer, say. This isn't me doing some crafty cropping, by the way. The guy's literally cut out a frame in the SNES version, even though there's plenty of space on the left side that could instead have been sacrificed before recentering the image and letting you see the man who is telling you why you need to go and shoot things. Your chopper's strafe function was located on the X button rather than on the SNES's shoulder buttons, which had been used as strafe in the previous Strike games on the Super Big N. Best of all, the explosions. Look at them. Look at them. Look at them! All of this works against Urban Strike massively, and if you played it only on the SNES, you might have thought it was rubbish, and you wouldn't have been being unfair. But boot this bad boy up on the Mega Drive, and you have a fast-paced, exciting, guitar-shredding, chopper blaster-up, sandbox walking simulator. You have a good game. You have a good game. It felt so much more vital on the Mega Drive, as though your mission to save the world did actually matter more, which is why you got to see your entire commander, and that holding a button to toggle strafing was something you should do, seeing as the default controller only had 3 buttons, and Jesus crikey, who the hell didn't think to use the shoulder buttons on the SNES version? What is wrong with you? It's far, far better on the Mega Drive. Number 12. Pit Fighter. Pit Fighter, it's fair to point out from the very beginning here, is an awful game. It might have lured me in with its luring ways in my childhood, but good god is it ever a mess. It ended up being influential, no doubt, but it's bloody painful having to play the thing these days. It probably was back in the old days too, I was just too young and stupid to know. Anyway, the Mega Drive version might look like a glorified Game Gear port, but it worked well enough. Fast and responsive, full of the characters and features that drew so many of us to the arcade game, it was, well, an arcade to console port from the 90s. A shit game done decently with limited resources. The SNES version, on the other hand, is one of the worst ports ever made of an already terrible game. Shunted to toy headquarters, that's THQ in modern parlance, it featured, well, I'm already lying now to claim it featured anything. Seriously, load up, straight to the title screen, no options, right into the fight, one chance, win it or it's game over. I'm all for no fucking around, but this was a bit too much. On Nintendo's machine you also had fewer characters to fight against, meaning you brawled with the same few repeatedly. The actual USP of Pit Fighter was missing, in that there was no crowd interaction and weapons weren't present at all. It was unresponsive, missing sound effects, shit, you didn't even get cash under your forklift for winning a match. It didn't have energy bars. If that was some postmodern statement on the value of stamina in the modern workplace, then it went well over all of our heads. So very, truly horrible. Number 13. Thunder Force 3. Alright, I've been harping on for a while, so I'll make this one quick. Basically, as with many action-heavy titles, the Mega Drive version, Thunder Force 3, runs faster, and the SNES version, called Thunder Spirits, fact fans, suffers slowdown. Meanwhile, there's a smaller visible play area on the SNES, meaning you can't see those little shits flying out of nowhere to kill you, and the Nintendo version is missing a few levels. It does replace them with some newly created ones though, so it's not all bad. But yeah, it's just better on the Mega Drive. Consistent speed matters in a shmup, reliant as it is on Twitch reactions, and it really does make a difference to your enjoyment just how much you have to hammer the fire button. Whoever decided to cut auto-fire out the SNES version needs to have a long, hard think about their life, meet up with the people who decided to put the strafe buttons from Urban Strike on one button instead of the shoulder buttons, and just fuck off. Score another one to Sega's Black Box of Doom. And that's that. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and I'm sure there's plenty of other games that flew the flag high for the Mega Drive while making the SNES look really rather silly. Feel free to leave a comment pointing out more times when Sega did indeed beat Nintendo, or, you know, a comment about anything really. Well, within reason. And, much as it sickens me to add, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and maybe I'll be able to muster up the courage to do more of these if people actually like them. Because why not, eh?